Baker's done a lot of work to get this rolling, and I'm going to bring him up to introduce our two speakers today. Thank you. Give him a hand.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I want to thank the head of our school, Mr. Brumsicle, and Mr. Monroe. Thank you, Dr. Melton, Mr. Kopf, Ms. LaRue, for their unwavering support since day one. There are two gentlemen here in the school for the next couple of days, and I'm going to speak about one of them a little bit more lengthy, but I'd first like to give a warm round of applause to the Director of Chapter Relations at Building Walls of Wisdom, and also the Principal at the Lincoln School in Kathmandu, Mr. Kemp Fernandez. If you have a brother or sister in elementary school or younger grades, ask them about their assembly this morning. Mr. Fernandez did some great activities and ran through some of his work with them this morning. So ask them about that and have a chat with them about how that went, because there's some good stuff going on there. As Mr. Monroe mentioned, last Friday you saw the Powtoon presentation. It was something that I put together last year and I presented to the Parents Association. And it was that presentation that got this whole thing rolling. And it was that presentation that had the Parents Association interested in bringing Mr. Morgan and Mr. Fernandez here today and this week. And if there's anything that the Powtoon taught us, it's that your parents feel like me and the rest of the teachers here at MKIS, and that is that service learning, volunteer initiatives, and community projects are really important and solid part of a 21st century education. Geoff Morgan and I met taking geography courses in university, and we taught for a little while in London, England. We've known each other for probably about 20 years. I'm honored to have Geoff as a friend. I have tremendous amount of respect for him as a teacher, a principal, a public speaker, and a modern idealist. Let's give a warm, heartfelt round of applause for Mr. Geoff Morgan, the founder of Building Walls of Wisdom.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I'm really excited to be here. This is my first trip to Mont Kiara, and I just think you guys have a beautiful school. Wonderful facilities, some great teachers, and what a good-looking group of students. Yeah. You guys have to be one of the best-looking audiences I have ever seen. Yeah. I think maybe it's the humidity maybe, or all the stairs in this school. You guys have a lot of stairs. But take it from me that you are very lucky to go to a school like this. Do you know that? Do you ever think about all the gifts that you have been given in life? Do you ever wonder why we live in a world where there are 5-star hotels, fancy restaurants, and an endless number of luxuries, yet some people can only dream of having enough food to eat, a warm bed to sleep in, or an opportunity to go to school? I often think about these things. I think about why is there so much equality in the world, inequality. So raise your hand if you've ever thought about these things. Put up your hand if you thought about why do some people have so much and others so little? Good for you. Because I believe that this is the first step and that each of you is ready and able to do beautiful things in this world. And this morning, I am here to share with you what I have learned about poverty over the last 10 years, to talk a little bit about Building Walls of Wisdom, a nonprofit organization that I founded, and invite you, challenge you to think about how we can create a more compassionate, equal, and peaceful world. Now for me, I didn't always realize my responsibility to others. For me, it happened much later in life. But when it happened in a single instant. Have you ever looked at the face of a child born in poverty? Not glanced at pictures on the internet or the TV, or maybe quickly walked past somebody on the street, but really looked into their eyes, beyond the surface of who they are. It was in Sierra's eyes that I saw a type of courage and fearlessness that would change my life forever. It was in Sierra's eyes that I realized that she is no different than you or I. And I knew that from that moment forward, I would do everything I could to save this 12-year-old girl from her life of impoverishment. But before I tell you about how I met Sierra, I'd like to begin with this photograph. This photograph was taken by astronauts aboard Apollo 17. It was the last manned mission to the moon. And since then, no human being has been far enough away from the Earth to capture this type of image. 40 years after this picture was taken, it is still one of the most widely distributed images in all of human history. It is timeless, it is universal, and it represents the only place in the entire universe that can support our fragile human lives. This is where 50,000 years of human history has taken place. The rise and fall of civilizations, the discovery and extinction of species. This is where everything has been invented, all of the music composed, all of the art created, and this is where every last love story has taken place. I sometimes look at this astonishing photograph and I think to myself, what a wonderful perspective the distance of 45,000 kilometers offers us. Because from this distance, you can't see the borders of our countries, the color of our skin, or the amount of money in our bank accounts. From this distance, you begin to understand that we are all in this together. You can begin to chip away at that persistent and flawed thought that we are somehow separate from one another. We are guests on this planet, but our time is brief. It is fleeting and it can be taken away from you in a heartbeat. Each of you is capable of doing beautiful things in our world. Begin today, because every day that passes is one less day for you to share your gifts with the world. And I understand that you are living in a complicated world, and your generation will face unprecedented challenges. So it is difficult to know where to begin. I'd like to begin in sub-Saharan Africa, where a great deal of our challenges exist, in a country called Ghana, and specifically in a community called Yapala. In the Yapala community, it is made up of mainly farmers who survive on less than $1 a day. And the total literacy rate, the amount of people that can read or write, is only 3%. But unfortunately, there is very little money for schools in rural Ghana. And in the video I'm about to show you, I want to invite you to think about what it would be like to live in this village, what it would be like to go to school in this village.
So the first day I got to this school, after speaking with the head teacher and then interacting with the children, I realized that these are serious people that need help. So if there is a need, if we can, why don't we come to these people's aid since they are so serious about education?
I ai kalara akalar din ye yul ka wan garno anto no samanin dan ne ka to ka pongwa ka
Doing about 2-3 days consecutive, that means we are not going to have classes, and it affects my teaching and then the learning of the children too.
شكرا بجرفين يرنكا سالت النورنا تكاتين يمشيشري سايت تي كوشي كلاس كما سوورد سايت وكو شيت يسو تي تو كلوسي سوري تو تشيكا تو كوم.
Right now, this school is from KG1 to P6. It is my hope to see them going to JSS, and in the future, I want to see them also attending SS and other institutions.
We have some settlements here, some especially these Fulanis. I have a lot of them in my school here. So if the new structure is being put up to us, to see that they themselves, they also try to bring more of their children to us so that we'll get more enrollments, especially the girl child. I'll be talking to them about the girl child.
Thank you. You can clap. You're allowed to. My own childhood was remarkably different from these children growing up in northern Ghana. I grew up in a small town just outside of Toronto in Canada, and my childhood was full of long bike rides, endless games of street hockey, and fishing trips on the weekend. When I was your age, I was vaguely aware of the world beyond my small town. And the only exposure I got to real poverty was often through these TV commercials that were full of starving African babies with flies in their faces and these swollen stomachs. And I have to admit, when they came on, I would change the channel. I used to think to myself, what difference could I possibly make? Although I was aware of these inequalities, I didn't feel like I had the power to change anything. In high school, I was a dedicated student and athlete. I got along with my teachers. I had a wide circle of friends. And in case you're curious, I'm the good-looking one in the photograph. The one standing next to the coach with that beautiful head of hair. Yeah, I know I'm bald. You can laugh. It's fine. A lot has changed since high school. During this time in my life, I didn't spend a lot of energy thinking about other people, especially not people halfway across the world that needed my help. I had other plans. I was destined to earn a degree from a top university, start a career, get married, buy a home in a good neighborhood, and then eventually, after a long, successful career, retire, preferably somewhere on a beach where I could kick back and enjoy life. But it was during my time in university that I began to question this picture, the picture that is so often sold to us, the picture of a perfect life, a life that is largely about going out and getting things for yourself, a life about status and recognition, a life about accumulating and consuming. I realize that we don't just see the world, we interpret it through very specific ideas and beliefs, through our education and our culture, and largely through the media and marketing. It is easy to see why people begin to think that life is all about them, when our lives have become polluted with a constant stream of messages telling us that we are not skinny enough, that our clothes are no longer cool, or urging us to splurge on ourselves. And as these questions began to surface with increasing frequency and intensity, I went out and I bought a map of the world and I hung it above my desk at university. And I would often stare at that map, daydreaming about visiting other countries and exploring other cultures. Somehow I was convinced that there must be more to it. So 1 week after graduating from university, I went out and I bought a large purple backpack. And I know what you're thinking, but purple was very cool at the time. Yeah, you have to trust me on that. And I left. I left everything and everyone I had ever known in search of a more meaningful understanding of our world. And over the last 15 years, I have been on an incredible journey through more than 60 countries, from Paris to Peru, from the streets of New York to Mount Kilimanjaro, from the Taj Mahal to the Great Wall of China. And although these places have been interesting, it is the people that I have met that have had the most profound impact on me. And nothing has affected me more completely or wounded me more deeply than witnessing the needless suffering caused by absolute poverty. My first intimate encounter with poverty came in June 2006 when I decided to go to India to volunteer for the summer. And it was there that I met Sierra. Although I worked with dozens of street children who survived on picking through mounds of garbage for food, Sierra stood out amongst the rest. She was funny and intelligent and had a tremendous desire to learn. And most days I would sit down with Sierra and help her with her homework. And on one occasion she invited me to visit her family in the slums. But I immediately said no. I cared about her too much, and I didn't think I could handle seeing where she lived. I was worried that these images would haunt me forever. But she was persistent, and that's one of the reasons that I really like her. So eventually I swallowed my fear and I went, and I was surprised at what I saw. This is a picture I took of Sierra and her family outside of their home. She's wearing the hat. And as you can see, this is much different than the images of poverty we are often exposed to. She is full of life and laughter and hope. In leaving India, I was determined to find a way to ensure that Sierra had the resources she needed to complete her schooling. And so I returned to my community and I shared her story. And with the help of a number of teachers and students, we raised enough money to send not only Sierra to school, but 50 other children as well. My first encounter with poverty taught me two things. The first is that although you can close your eyes to the things you do not want to see in our world, you can turn the channel, you can close your computer. You can't close your heart to the things that you do not want to feel. And perhaps more importantly, I learned that our small actions can literally change the course of people's lives. We are all capable of doing beautiful things in this world. So if so little is needed to help 50 children living in India, why do we live in a world in which millions of children live in poverty? This question really began to bother me. And so I went out and bought all the books I could find about poverty. In a desperate attempt to find a solution, I began traveling through South America and Asia and Africa, building homes for the homeless, volunteering in drop-in centers and visiting AIDS clinics and refugee camps. And it was through this experience that I learned a large part of the solution came back to Sierra. I learned that the most powerful agent of change on our planet can be an educated child, and especially an educated girl. 5 years ago, I was sitting in a coffee shop, and I began writing all of this in an email. I wrote about how education is a great equalizer, how it is fundamental to human development and one of the most basic of human rights. I wrote about what I had seen and how it affected me. And I shared my dream to build schools in impoverished communities and to live in a world in which where you are born does not determine whether you get to go to school. I poured my heart into a long email. I entered 50 email addresses and I clicked send. Have you ever had a dream or a belief that you held deep within you, but you were too afraid to share? You were afraid of what people might think. I was worried that people would think I was crazy. This idea of building schools in impoverished communities seemed impossible. But then an amazing thing happened. I got my first response. I rushed to open the email and I read, "Dear Jeffrey, I believe in your dream. You can do it. Love, Mom." Yeah. Yeah. She's the only one that calls me Jeffrey. But thankfully, it wasn't long before we got our second response and our third and our fourth. We built a website and we decided our first school would be in Kenya. And then a second amazing thing happened. Within the course of just a few months, we raised enough money to build our first school in Amori Joy, Kenya. And a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to visit that school. And when I arrived, all of the teachers lined up to shake my hand. I met some adorable students and a very proud principal named Philip of 450 children, in which half were girls. I also met an entire school with the same haircut as I have. Yeah. Since then, we have been busy building schools in Kenya and Ecuador and Sri Lanka, in Ghana and Nicaragua. And today, 700 students learn in schools that we have built. And in 10 years from now, close to 7,000 students will have received an education in one of our schools. Thank you. Even more exciting, I think, is that we are part of a larger global trend that is winning the war against poverty. Since the year 2000, the number of people living in poverty on our planet has been cut in half. An astonishing 4.2 billion people have gained access to clean drinking water, and 45 million children have received access to an education. It is amazing to think that you may be the first generation to live in a world in which all humanity can enjoy the basic living standards that we take for granted every day. But for me, the best part, I mean the really good stuff, are still the individual stories. Just a few years ago in Yopala, out of a community of 700 people, only 16 people could read. 6 women and 10 men. And this is where students sporadically attended school. But today, Yopala has a new school for 150 children, and attendance is up. Sitting in the front of one of those classrooms is Sakina Fusini. She is 9 years old, and she loves to read, and she's one of the school's best students. She dreams of being a nurse one day, a life that was unimaginable just a few years ago. A life in which she can choose when to get married, how many children to have. A life in which she can get her family the food and medical treatment they need. A life in which her daughter can go to school. I know I don't need to stand here and convince you to care. I know you do. But it's not a lack of compassion that keeps 58 million children on earth living in poverty. It is a lack of action. The time has always been and always will be right now. Because each of you is capable of doing beautiful things in our world. I will leave you with the words of an individual who grew up in rural Africa. And he didn't attend a beautiful school like this. Every day he went to class in a tiny one-room schoolhouse. And armed only with his education and his dreams, he went on to change his community, change his country, and change the world as we know it. His name is Nelson Mandela, and I am sure you are familiar with his story. He once said that overcoming poverty is not a task for charity. It is an act of justice. Poverty is not natural. It is man-made. And it can be overcome and eradicated through the actions of human beings. Sometimes it falls on a generation to be great. Sometimes it falls on a generation to be great. I believe that you can be that generation our world so desperately needs. A generation of global citizens that is willing to open up their eyes, but more importantly, their hearts to all humanity. And to begin to create a world that you want to live in. A world that you are proud to live in. Thank you.